Welcome to another episode of Come Together. And we're back with another episode. Jenny Chan, welcome. So happy to have you here. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Listen, it's funny. I get emails every now and then, for people asking to come on the show, and I'd say maybe so far 9 out of 10 times I kind of pass over them. But there's something about about your, I guess, both a combination of your subject and what you immediately started off saying, about what you wanted to talk about that really just caught my attention. And I figured I'd do a quick Google search and see if you were real, and you were, and that was great.
I'm not a bot. I'm right here.
I know, and it's funny. I'm doing the same thing because when I'm reaching out to people to come onto my show, I'm like, I'm a real person. I promise. Here's some real episodes. I promise. You could do a Google search. I'm a real person. But there's a lot of bots out there, so I'm happy that I'm happy I double checked, and I'm happy that you're here tonight. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for actually accepting my
Sure.
self-invitation to go on your podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So tell me about a little bit about yourself, and tell me what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yes, so I am the co-founder of Pacific Atrocities Education. My other co-founder moved on to do AI and tech. And basically, we're a nonprofit that research a lot about World War II in Asia. And we have, in the last 10 years, we this really started out as kind of a hobby project, and then I was trying to look for a job in this field, but I really couldn't find a job in this field. And so here I am 10 years later. Um, and I started out trying to figure out what had happened in Asia, like when my grandma was alive. I used to love watching anime, and I was watching anime in front of her. I think like she even threw out a whole box of like manga that I kept under my bed, and she
Nice.
was telling me that Japanese people are evil. You shouldn't really learn from them. Blah 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 blah. And I was thinking like, oh man, this old lady is racist, and I used to like hide my manga.
And where would she live in?
She lived in Hong Kong during the occupation of Hong
Okay.
Kong.
Okay.
And yeah, and so then I was thinking, wow, this is crazy. And then she would tell me stories here and there, like how her family had to exchange all of her money into military yen, and she was really like depressed, really like I barely I never heard her laugh, actually, now that we talk about it. And I think a lot of it had to stem from the war. And so then when she passed away, I really found this like box of military yen and like rice rationing coupon. And I thought like, wow, maybe what she was saying has some merits there was some merits to what she was saying.
Yeah.
And so then I started researching more about what had happened in World War II. I was reading on Wikipedia that like 30 million people perished, and then I was reading some books, and then and I there was really only one famous book about the subject, it's The Rape of Nanking. And then I was reading The Rising Sun by John Toland. And then I stumbled upon this book. It was really hard to find too. It's called The Death Factory, which is about Unit 731. I think we can talk more about it later in this podcast.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking that Rape of Nanking is good. It's like about 30,000 people getting it is not good in terms of like the storyline, but like it got me to an understanding of what World War II was. But 300,000 people in my mind, I was thinking, well, if this chapter is about 300,000 people, what happened to like the other, 29.7 million people? Sorry, did you hear my dog? I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
put him
Let's. Yeah. Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
Let me put him outside. I'll be right
Sure.
back.
Let's pause 1 second. Happens to me all. I have 2 kids, so it's no big deal. It happens to me all the time.
And so I was thinking if Rape of Nanking is about one episode of World War II in Asia, and that was 300,000 people, then what happened to the 29.7 million other people? And so I was thinking, I was trying to go really dig more into what was happening. And there's not a whole lot of like literature out there. In fact, one of the most important like fraction of World War II in Asia was called Quantum Army, and our organization was the first organization organization that published a book about the Quantum Army that started like World War II in Asia
What
and
was it?
Manchuria. Yeah, it was. That's a great question. So no one heard about it. So they staged a false flag event on September 18th, 1931, 10 years before Pearl Harbor, and they invaded Manchuria.
Who did?
And
I'm sorry.
the quantum,
Okay.
the Japanese army.
Great. For context, for my, and I'm sure you know this very well. I don't know anything about this, and most Americans know very little even about where Asia is on a map.
Yes,
Just
exactly. Yeah.
So for context, could we before we even get into that real quickly, just to lay it out, um, who was the conflict between at this point, and what's the what's the context? Geographically, where is everyone at, and what's everyone's
Yes.
relationship at this point? Can we start with that, and that way, we could kind of set the stage and set up a map for people that don't know, including
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. That's a great question.
Great.
So geographically, Manchuria is in China, and this
Okay.
is a conflict between Japan and China.
Okay. And where is Japan relative to China on a map? And what do do they fight over religious dogma, minerals, philosophy, or forms of government? Like what are they
I
what's the
think it's
conflict about?
more like a racial superiority because
Okay.
the Japanese at this point think that they're above their Asian neighbors.
I see. And where are they at this point in terms of, are they flourishing? What's their relationship with the rest of the world at this point?
Yeah, why don't I start from 1905 then?
Yeah, please. That'd be great.
So the United States had appeared in the Japanese shore in the 1800 actually. And before then, Japan was somewhat of an isolationist country. And once the United States showed up with gunboat diplomacy, forcing them to open trade, then they were thinking, wow, we're too weak. We need to learn from the West and we need to modernize. And so then they sent their best to the West to learn how to prepare militarily. And at the same time, China was really declining due to the addiction of opium. And also their military was not really up to par in comparison to like what Japan was doing.
So opium
And
was a huge was a cultural problem for China.
yes, it was a cultural problem, and the government was really not too centrally controlling of their was didn't really have control over their people. And it's a
I
cultural
wonder what that
issue.
sounds like.
It was a cultural issue. It was a lack of modernization issue. They were still very behind in terms of like military, right? And so then what had happened is that since Japan was already getting up ahead and they had sent men to Harvard and Yale to learn like what the West looked like and how they can become more like the West, then they sent a diplomat named Baron Conical to Teddy Roosevelt to try to negotiate to so then and like basically formed this relationship. And at one point they formed this really well relationship that Teddy Roosevelt even brought Baron Conical to Wall Street to fundraise
Wow.
for to build up their military.
Wow. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
so that's historical context.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, so the relationship between America and Japan is a positive relationship at this point.
Very good.
And
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 so
America and China, what's their relationship? Or not really existent at this point? Or
actually, in Chinese people were barred from coming into the United States by 1882 because they were working for cheaper labor. I mean, they were cheaper laborers, and so then white people, white miners, and white workers kind of saw them as as a competitor.
hmm
And so there was the Chinese Exclusionary Act of 1882, And history repeats itself. You can see a
I was
lot of
about to say.
parallel.
It sounds absolutely relevant. I don't know. It sounds pretty crazy.
And so then in 1882, Chinese people were excluded from the country, and there were also a lot of massacres happening with Chinese people, with Americans. And the biggest lynching event in this country, I think, or at least in California, was actually on Chinese Americans in the LA Chinese massacre. And there was actually no Chinese
What
concept
happened
of
there?
they lynched a bunch of Chinese workers because they were working for cheaper, and a lot of things were just blamed onto them. Um,
Was there ever Chinese responses, or did they ever fight back for themselves?
there was a trade war
Trade war.
in the like early 1900s. And so this is like really history. So the trade war
This is
of the
history.
Chinese.
This is modern events. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. And so this trade war of China US, you can argue, started in like the early 1900, right?
wow.
And so and so that's the context with China and
Gotcha. So we, like
US.
Japan, we're not on great terms with China because they're sending cheap because Americans perceive that this or they're complaining that the Chinese people are willing to work for cheaper than Americans, and ultimately leading to violent and murderous responses,
Right,
which is
exactly.
never good.
And then it's so fascinating because Teddy Roosevelt also won a Nobel Peace Prize by giving Korea to Japan in 1905. And so Korea was then under Japan's torture for starting in 1905.
And Japan had a similar relationship to Korea as they did with other countries, as in they felt superior and they felt they kind of bully them.
Yes.
I see.
And yeah, and so then, and if you look on a map, Korea is very close to Manchuria. You can
Okay.
pull it up. You can look it up right
Yeah,
now.
I wanted to get the map
Yeah,
open for this
yes.
conversation because I wanted to I did want to go into those details. Cool. Yeah, so okay, I'm here.
hmm So Manchuria today is called Northeast China.
Okay. Northeast China.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And
And
so here, right next to Mongolia, you see that little like, oh shit, here.
yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. And
Cool.
Korea. So you can see how close Korea was to it still is to Japan. And then just next to that, that's Manchuria. And so Japan thought, well, why don't I in by 1931,
Hmm.
they started a false flag event and took over Manchuria as well. This is like decades of history that I just like really blended
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah. Okay. But we're going to maybe we'll do another one with that, but we'll focus on World War II
Yes.
for the rest of this because I do want to go.
And,
I'm sure I'd love to go back to that too. But yes.
and it's interesting because at this point in 1931, um, US was also kind of exploiting China in the open door policy. So then they have different kind of trade. US won the trade war at that point, and
Yeah.
so China had there was an open door policy, which is to kind of exploit the trade rules.
Hmm.
And because of Japan invading China, now US doesn't have Japan closed the door for the
Right.
US.
No way.
And
So that causes U.S. and Japan relationships to fall
sour.
apart?
Right. But US was still selling steel and oil to Japan during the rape of Nanking. It just so happened that Pearl Harbor stopped that
Right. So
10 years later.
10 years later. Right. So let's talk a little bit about those 10 years and let's talk about so World War II. Um, so at this point, again, when we were talking on the phone, we were saying how during when people think about World War II, we think about Europe, we think about Hitler, we think about Eastern Europe and Nazi Germany, and we don't really talk about what Asia's involvement was at all. And you said that part of the reason was that a lot of the documentation was classified. Is that what it was? Is that what you mentioned?
Yes, a lot of it was classified until like very recently. And also when Japan surrendered, they burned most of the documents. So whatever we find is just by chance that we were able to find it.
So we're not going to get the full picture really because we have too many missing pieces.
Yeah, yeah, really, but we get like a part of the picture, which is still pretty good. I think it's still pretty like illuminating.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, and I actually want to ask as far as, and I wanted, okay, and you brought this up at the beginning now. I guess now that we have a little bit more context, we could go back to what you were talking about. And you mentioned that your grandmother was complaining and was particularly upset about the fact that her family was forced to trade their money in for military yen instead of whatever currency they had, right?
Yes.
I want to just maybe you can elaborate on what kind of impact that has on a family because my grandfather had a similar story. My grandfather was in Poland at the time on the border between I believe it was Ukraine and Russia and the USSR at the time. And his family knew that Germany was going to overtake Poland. And so the question was, do they go to Ukraine and go to go to the USSR, or they go to to Germany, what would become Germany, once Poland fell. And um and there happens to be that the town was on the border, and within a couple of years, the town had shifted, I guess, sovereignty a few times, and they went from being a very wealthy family to having no money at all, just based on being forced to keep on swapping their currency over to other countries' currencies, and they lost an enormous amount of money like that. So I mean, I don't know if you can elaborate as what that means for your family, but I know that that
Yeah,
I didn't
definitely.
understand it. That's great. Very, very interesting.
And military yen basically had like no value by the end of the war. And so our families have very similar stories then that after the war, my grandma's family was left with no money.
Wow. Wow. And because the money at that point for Chinese military yen was worth, like,
No, the Japanese military
Japanese
yen.
military yen. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So at
Jap
first, in the beginning of the war, I was reading about this. At beginning of the war, Hong Kong dollars to the Japanese military yen was 1 to 1. Then it
okay.
became like 1 to 10, and then it become like 1 to 100, and then by
It
the
was
end of
that
the war,
dramatic.
right? Yeah, and then so by the end of the war, it was worth nothing because Japan had fallen, and so
Wow.
then for these people, it was worth less than toilet paper.
Wow. Wow. It's crazy. I can't imagine. I mean, it's like equivalent of everything in my bank account just being worthless now. I mean, everyone's savings just gone. And like because
Yeah.
okay, well, you know what? We owe so much money to everyone else that you know what? The euro is the new currency now, and then the American dollar is worth a lot less. And think about what would happen to everyone here. That'd be crazy. It's
Yeah, but right
fascinating.
now inflation is scary in our country, don't you think?
I think inflation might be one of the scariest things to me, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, but. My fear is that the emphasis is on the wrong syllable when it comes to cutting spending. And my understanding at this time is that there's America, the homeland, which is all the people that live here and work and create value and participate and contribute to the economy and culture and political climate and everything. And then there's America, the empire, which is interested in what they call spreading democracy, or getting people under the American thumb, or rule. And the empire gets its source of energy, it's money literally from the taxpayers, from the people that are working here. And then but they've been overspending on empire building to the extent that the people that are providing the funds for the empire to continue growing are running out of money and running out
Yeah.
of resources, and we're not creating, we're printing more money than actual value created and actual services provided. And
Yes.
so, my concern for inflation is not just like, oh, everyone has to stop spending a couple of bucks here and there and start budgeting. It's like we have to stop expanding, all over the world for a little while and focus on,
Us.
regathering our efforts. Yeah, and focus
Yeah.
on us for a little while. And
Hmm.
and less wars, and it looks like we're getting into more now, and it's almost like we left the Middle East, like we're like, you know what, there's no more damage to do here. Let's go to South America now. Like okay, I mean, if you want to, but it doesn't look. I don't think it's going to work for anyone. So,
I really don't
um,
think so either. But
that's my concern.
and I think they're very focused on having other people be like them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then let's spread democracy and yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. Let's go back
Please.
to World
Yes,
War
yes,
II.
let's do it. So anyway, so you're finding out, so you're realizing that there's very little history, and you're doing homework now to try to dig up more work, and you ended up did you end up writing the book or participating in the book about the quantum army?
I helped my research fellow in researching and like
Awesome.
yeah, but it was hard work because a lot of these like National Archives maps and paper and whatnot, they're actually very fragile. They're 80 years old. And in fact, this is one trivial fact that the Civil War papers are actually in better shape than World War II papers because in Civil War, paper was still printed out of like cotton paper. And by the time of World War II, there was no resources. So it's all onion peel paper.
Wow. That's crazy. And you said that very few of the documentation, if any, had been digitized, right?
Yeah, it's like maybe 1% in the National Archives have done because we're too busy fighting wars. And so then I was just like, well, let's just do it because we're already here. So we
Yeah.
were digitizing, and I think now we have like 1 million pages of
Wow.
like World War II documents related to like Unit 731, to the Quantum Army, to like Manchuria, to like the policy at the time, and also like war crimes document and like the Philippines, the Bataan Death March. And so we have all kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay, well let's tackle these topics. You want to? Right now I caught four things. You got Unit 731, the Quantum Army. I want to talk about. I mean, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on the history, it seems that you mentioned Manchuria a bunch of times, and maybe the context a little bit more about what that is, or about the
Yeah.
place, or war crimes, which I would love to hear more about. You know?
Yeah, so Manchuria is actually very fascinating. Like the more I look at it, the more fascinating it was. Like Japan conquered it for this kind of economic utopia because it's a very like resource rich land.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had forced laborers who they grabbed 4 million like forced laborers from Korea and from China to work on this land, and from going from like mining to manufacturing. And also Unit 731, the infamous Unit 731, is located there. Actually not too infamous because not a lot of people have
Everyone
heard
knows
about
about it,
it.
right? Exactly. You got
Yeah.
to get infamous. So how do you?
You have to be infamous if people heard about it.
That's right. That's right. So tell me about so it was and who was fighting over it at this point? You said that Japan conquered it. Who else was interested in it? I'm trying to find it on a map over here. Um,
Maybe
Spy.
type in Northeast China.
How far is it? Here's Beijing, North Korea, Shenyang.
Xinyan
Um,
is a part of Manchuria.
okay, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So it's right by the. Oh, it's on the border of the Koreas.
Yes.
Okay, I see exactly what we're talking about now. And it looks like it looks and is Dalian part of it? And
Yes.
Dandong?
Dalian is part of it. Hey, you see Hey Longjian?
So it's valuable because it's on the water and it's
Yes.
bordering the. Yeah, okay, gotcha. So it's good for trade, it's good for resources, it's probably really important militarily as far as strategy goes.
Yes,
And,
because Russia is also there. And
oh,
Russia had built this railroad that was funded by the French. And since Japan captured it, they
yeah.
no longer had to pay back the French. And then those
Wow.
French financial company had to file bankruptcy at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So
Can you imagine you got a great business deal and all of a sudden you found out that the company that was doing your work for you got conquered by another country?
yes, there was a lot going on internationally at the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so you can see that this is
What
like
do
a
the
very
people
important.
consider themselves? What the people that are there, do they consider themselves Chinese? Do they consider themselves
That's
Japanese.
actually a very interesting question. So, the last dynasty of China was not actually the Han Chinese. They were actually the Manchurian Chinese. And before the last dynasty of China, Manchuria was not considered a part of China, but because they had invaded China, they incorporated that region into China itself. And
Hmm.
that's why it was then considered Manchuria, China.
Cool. Gotcha. Awesome. And the people now, what are the people? Now they're Manchurian?
Chinese.
Chinese.
They consider themselves Chinese. It's
Gotcha.
considered
Gotcha.
the northeast part of China.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Awesome. That's great context, and that's really good to know. What's the is this a the Hinganling? Are those mountains? Is that a mountain range just north of it? North of Changchun?
Uh,
Changchun?
oh, that's Harbin. North of Chengchun is Harbin. And then there's Heilongjian.
Yeah,
I have
Halar. So
never
between Harbin and Halar. It looks
between
like
Harbin.
yeah, if you're looking at my phone, you can see
That's a lake. Yeah.
it's a lake. It looks dry to me. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so let's keep going. So this place is obvious. And by the way, and it's pretty. Is Manchuria considered like calm, or is it considered relatively unstable? Since World War
At the
Two.
time, it was considered rural, and that's why they decided that it's a good idea to start a human experimentation lab there because no one's going to know.
Okay, so tell us about 731, which I guess is a human experimentation lab. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so at the time of Japan occupying Manchuria, Ishishiro had started a lab in Tokyo, but then it was way too high profile and he was afraid of like Karens telling on him and whatnot. And so
Hmm.
then he decided to move his lab to Manchuria. So he took a road trip with his friends to consider like, oh, where am I going to put this lab? And he picked a soy sauce factory. But even like at a remote area with the soy sauce factory, like these prisoners were still able to escape from his human experimentation. So then he was thinking maybe that's not remote enough. So then he took over a village in Pingfan to start his human experimentation lab.
And what kind of experiments were they doing? Was this like, I mean, World War II was notorious for human experimentation, apparently, and
Yes.
it's crazy that even more of it's going on. What were they trying to do there?
They were trying to treat frostbites. They were trying to make biological war weapons
Mm.
because he had read the Geneva Convention and he said that, well, if the Geneva, if it's so powerful, if germs so powerful that they needed to write rules about it, we need to harness this kind of germs. And so then he was making weapons. At one point, he was making fleas so then the fleas can uh what do you call it, transfer the plague. And but then in order to make more fleas he needed more rats, so then he was paying villagers in these like other villages to breed rats so then he can breed more fleas to spread the plague with his ceramic bomb.
That
it,
is,
it sounds so disgusting that I'm just like, okay, what did I just say?
yeah. You know what? It's funny that you say that. I was thinking about this a lot recently. Sometimes we hear things that sound so far-fetched that we just dismiss it out of hand because we don't even want to like think about the fact that that could be reality, and
Right.
like you hear things, you're like, no, that just can't be true. Like, come on, bugs that you give a disease to it that goes around and acts like a bomb, like fleas that go around and it's like acts like a weapon, like to get everyone sick, and like how you even gonna control that? What are you gonna do? But I mean,
Exactly. How are you going to control that? And so, like, as part of what I was thinking about when I was reading these documents, I'm like, okay, so Japan wanted to occupy China, but what the hell are they going to do with, like,
yeah,
soil with glanders and anthrax? What were they thinking? It's not like you can just pour bleach and then, like, stop the plague, right?
yeah, yeah. So it's almost like self-inflicted wound at that point.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
But
Okay.
then they were doing human experimentation to see, like, also, um, how human bodies would react to the plague, for example, and talk about destroying like data and documents. It's very interesting because if you think about it, we can never know about how many humans were captured in this human experimentation lab because they started from because in order to figure out like to number the victims or to dehumanize the victims, they gave them like numbers. So it
Yeah.
goes from like 0 to 1,000, and then they start to count again, and then from 0 to another 1,000. So we never know. And then they were calling these victims logs or Maruta just to like dehumanize them. And
What does
so,
it mean?
hmm?
What does Emeruta mean?
A Maruta means log in Japanese.
Log?
Yeah.
So they're
So
calling
then
people
each,
logs.
yes, and I was reading like the special transfer order from the Quantum Army, and then they were saying, oh, however many Maruta captured, then you already
Mhm.
figured out, like, okay, so they were capturing humans. They were not using it as like logs or like lumber mill or whatnot. So
Yeah.
it's just like so that's why we can never know how many humans were used for human experimentation. But then, like, the consequences of Unit 731 is also severe because they were using it on like soil on China, for example. Let's go back to
Wow.
Pearl Harbor, right? Like, Americans know about Pearl Harbor, but right after Pearl Harbor, FDR wanted to attack Japan back for morale. And so what they did was that they sent these pilots out to Tokyo, but it was like a one-way ticket. And but they can maybe possibly make it back to China. And so then they landed in Chinese airfields in like Zhejiang province, and they then sprinkled and then Chinese people rescued these pilots who landed in China. And in order for to revenge on these Chinese villages, then the Japanese Unit 731 disseminated anthrax and glanders in the soil. And so for decades later, these farmers who were working on this land would get glanders and anthrax on their
Oh,
legs,
gosh.
and their legs, their skin would like rot, and it was
Did it
happening
carry over
decades.
to the food
No,
or the
but
crops?
their
Just a
crops
minute.
were, yes, their crops were destroyed. And so, yeah, so this is the kind of like things that were happening in World War II in China. And so I was thinking when I was reading through it, I'm like, wow, why have I never learned about this? This sounds, and it's interesting because the lawsuit happened like in maybe in 2002 as well, up until 2002,
Hmm.
where they were really a lot of the Chinese victims went to the Japanese court to try to get reparation or whatnot because it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
really affecting their livelihood. And the court said, well, we acknowledge that it happened, but there's we cannot pay because it was like a time of war. And so, yeah, so I didn't make it up. It really did
Yeah.
happen because the
Yeah.
Japanese court did admit it.
Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting because you think about it's a different type of atrocity, like you read stories about what was going on in, I guess, Eastern Europe or throughout Europe, and you hear more stories of decapitations and mass body pileups and mass shootings and stuff like that. And this almost feels like, we're not gonna do that straight up. We're gonna like infect you. Or we're gonna get you like we're just gonna it almost feels sneakier in a certain way,
Yes,
that like
exactly.
it's a lot. It's almost like passive. It's passive and it's probably more intelligent. It's got to be smarter warfare, right? Because you're not giving. There's no face to the crime. There's no name. There's no face. There's very little association. There's very little documentation. And at the end of the day, you can say everything you want and you can know that it happened, but there's no one to be held accountable at any point. You don't have any kind of records.
Right, exactly.
Interesting.
And after the war, the Soviets went into China, and the first thing Ishishiro did was to burn all the records. And he apparently he did save a copy for like his luggage, and he went to Japan and he faked his own death, but the CIA found him.
Wow. They were looking for him?
They were looking for him, and but they ended up buying his research, um, just because, like,
Yeah, I wonder why.
yeah, yeah, they needed it.
I bet. I bet. For science, right?
Right.
That's what we needed more.
And so if you like hear about like anthrax, that remember all those anthrax attacks, a lot of people don't remember this, but like an anthrax attacks in like 2001, that all came from Japanese technology dating back
Did
to
it?
World War II.
Wow. So it was out of the playbook.
Yeah.
Wow. Crazy. So, okay.
I know this is like an evening time. You're like, okay, I'm trying to go to bed in the big.
No, 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 no. I think this is important. This is important. This is great to think about. So, so this protect. So right now, and this is post Pearl Harbor. This is pre Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. Has American and Japanese relationship soured yet or not yet?
During the sprinkling of the
Yeah.
biological weapon, yeah, that's already soured. That's after Pearl Harbor, and they sent through little raiders to Japan, and then the Japanese were upset about the Chinese people rescuing the U.S. pilot, and so then
Right.
that's why they had a revenge attack
Right.
on Zhejiang. But
And when did and when did it what year did American and Japanese relationships deteriorate to the point of hostility
1941 officially, but if you think
officially?
about it, FDR was supplying China like some weapons to fight the war in Japan as well. I mean, against Japan as well.
And when was
China
that?
and Mhm.
When was that? When was China and Japan fight? When were China and Japan fighting?
Well, Japan occupied China in like 1931, but officially they started fighting in 1937 when Japan wanted more of the Chinese land.
So we flip-flopped. America flip-flopped our relationship.
Yes.
Another thing that rhymes with current events, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting because talk about spreading democracy. The family that got America to really flip-flop on their Asia policy was the Soane family. And the Soane family, the grandpa Charlie Soane made money selling Bibles in America. And you know Pearl Buck's China, like Good Earth
Yeah.
movie. Yeah, so then they had this like idea that there were a ton of Chinese people in China waiting to become Christian. And so Charlie, it sounds so out of far-fetched. And so then Charlie Soane made money selling Bibles, and and then there were three sisters, Song Mei Ling, Song Ailing, and Song Qingling. And Song Mei Ling ended up getting like USDA cotton contract and also like the China land lease supply
Mhm.
money. And the Sohm family really lobbied FDR into kind of helping out China.
By helping to spread Christian values.
Yes.
And how did the Chinese take that?
Chinese at the time, actually, this is like a very unpopular opinion, and Chinese people call the Song family like making money out of disaster because the China and Chiang Kai-shek, who was married to one of the Song sister,
Yeah.
was the ultimately the World War II leader of China, but he was just a fancier warlord than
Mhm.
other warlords. And at this time, China was not really what you think about China today. It was very like fractured as a country. And so there's all kinds of different warlords fighting for all kinds of different part of China because China is such a big country. And so yeah, and so a lot of the
We're
yeah, the
talking about yeah
misconception,
the spread of Christianity, the attempted spread of Christianity.
yes, attempted to spread Christianity.
And is there a religion or has there been religion historically in China that people had adhered to or because I don't know what
Confucian, Buddhism,
okay
right?
yeah
And yeah,
gotcha and remind me if you know I don't know if you know because I don't know I asked a friend of mine who's from Mumbai the difference between Hinduism and Buddhism Which one was Buddhism was later than Hinduism, or vice versa?
I don't remember, but I think that Buddhism actually did come from India because Monkey King, my favorite classic,
Yeah.
Monkey King was going to the West to get the wisdom from Buddha, right? And I
Cool.
think that he must have been going to India.
Amazing. 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 And so China in World War II is not what China is today. It's not really a threat as far as we know. In fact, it was an ally to America as of 1941, you said, or 39?
1937.
37.
Yes.
We became allies. And then we were allies until post World War II, where Japan was no longer really considered a threat to anyone. And at what point did China start rebuilding? And when did they kick that opioid problem?
Why did they kick the drug problem?
Yeah.
I think the drug problem was solved post 1949, post Mao.
Okay.
But yeah, and also when you're at a war, when you're at a total war and you're starving, I don't think you're going to be thinking about opium too much.
Well, I mean, you may not want to think about it, but if you have a dependency on it, I think that there's a lot of people that have very limited funds and are addicted or dependent that unfortunately might lose sight of their priorities or the right way to spend their monies at different points. So I mean I could imagine that even in wartime, it's if you're really an addict or you really have a chemical dependency on it, then you're probably not making right decisions anyway. You know.
Yeah, actually, in fact, I think at one point the opium problem was so bad. In fact, I visited like a comfort women. I don't know if you know what comfort women.
No, please.
Comfort women were like sex slaves in World War II. So, and a lot of people think about comfort women as like Korean comfort women, but they were doing it like everywhere that Japan occupied. And so I was visiting one of the comfort women in Shanxi in China,
Hmm.
and her father was addicted to opium during the war. Um, and um, and it was actually a really sad story. Let me digress to that story.
Please.
Her so she was kept in like a camp where she was forced to serve Imperial Japanese soldiers, and so she was raped like 10, 15 times a day, and by the time war ended, she was pregnant. And but with a very like traditional Chinese village, she didn't want to let anyone know. So she kind of kept away from the public eye for a while, like she didn't go to the street and whatnot. And then after a while, she gave birth, and then her mom and her buried the child and buried the baby in the cave after the war. And she hasn't thought about it since until like I was asking her, "Oh, what happened to you?" And she was so old, and I was interviewing her that she just
Hmm.
came out with that story. And yeah,
It's crazy, crazy, crazy. So that was and these what do you call
comfort woman.
comfort women. They were Japanese,
No, they're Chinese. Well,
Chinese.
actually, they were Japanese comfort women too. They were in the beginning. They were like Japanese women who only served the generals, and like and later on in the war too. Like you can see that the generals and the higher tier of Japanese art soldiers had um like Japanese or Korean women, and then wherever they occupy, those are like that's like for the bottom tier of the Japanese soldiers.
Wow. Yeah, we don't, it's also something interesting, and I guess it's because it's really, really so unpleasant and so terrible to think about. But we don't think about the sexual violence that war often, and we don't talk nearly about enough about it or learn nearly enough about it, about the sexual violence that war creates. Because I mean, we had that with the Ukrainians, the Germans, the Russians. We had, I mean, everyone, and war just brings out this animal side, and I mean. I could never understand. I hope to never understand,
And
but
also, at this point, Japan was trained to believe that they're better than all of their Asian neighbors.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a big part of what happened.
Well, there's a big, I think that psychologically, and I mean, we need this, people, people that want other people to go to war need for this to happen. We need to dehumanize and create an us and them mentality because it allows us to cognitively distance ourselves from our actions and make justifications and say, you know, I would never do this to another person, but that's not a person. That's an animal. Like I would never do that to another person.
Yes,
That's not a
exactly.
person. And the more that and at a certain point, I imagine that we even like need that justification. Like we need an excuse to keep doing what we're doing because we couldn't live with ourselves otherwise. And so to have and to say we are supreme, we are better than they are, we are
That was
whatever.
actually like Teddy Roosevelt's justification to colonize Philippines too. So I don't know if you know too much about the American colonization of
I know
Philippines.
nothing about it. So fill me.
And so, and because it was such an unpopular thing to go colonize another country, what Teddy Roosevelt ended up doing is to get a bunch of Filipinos and had a World Expo in 1905 in St. Louis, and to display their like they're uncivil. He shaved a bunch of their teeth and then put dogs in there and then said that, oh, the Filipinos are dog eaters and blah blah blah. And
Way. That's where the
yes,
prep
and this
came
is the
from?
1905 World Expo. And so then that's justified why they needed to expand their empire to the Philippines. And it's interesting because like during World War II, right after Pearl Harbor, and like within 8 hours they were attacking Philippines and whatnot. And at first the Filipinos were like welcoming the Japanese. They're like, oh my God, what can be worse than the Americans? and and then they witnessed the Japanese like brutally like raping their women and also killing their children, and so then they were like, okay, actually the Japanese can be worse than Americans. So
Wow.
then they joined the Americans in fighting the Japanese.
They did.
Yes, so it was like to pick a lesser evil.
And I guess I guess America's interest in the Philippines would be that geographically it's
In the Pacific.
it's in the Pacific. It's all the way to the west. Would you call it the west? Its face
Oh, are
is
you
it,
looking at a map right now?
I'm looking at a globe, yeah, but the globes are circular and they throw me off. But,
Well, they're
but
interested in the
yeah,
Philippines because then they can trade with China. And
because
also
they could.
that's why they were also interested in Hawaii as well, because the Pacific is
Right. Well,
very
that's
big.
that's what I just recently figured out, and I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Hello, and then the fact that Hawaii is the one that got bombed, I was like, and it's funny because growing up, I was like, why would anyone attack Hawaii? And I'm like, oh, because it's the closest point that you can get to America from the, and I only realized this like a month ago. So,
Yes.
yeah. So
And
that was
also
America's. So what was wait? Do you know where Hawaii was before America had it?
they were Hawaii, they had a queen, they had a king. And
Really?
before, yeah, before they has
How would
like
end up there?
contact with like in 1778, I think some sailors discovered Hawaii.
I was gonna say, how did
And
anyone find it even?
hmm?
It's, I said, it's where would anyone? How would anyone end up in Hawaii? It's in the middle of nowhere. There's no land around it.
I think it was during the Ice Age they ended up in Hawaii.
I guess so. I guess so. Anyway, yes, I'm sorry. So continue your so America so Americans came to colonize the Philippines. The Philippines were like, "Oh, wait, let's work with the Japanese." And they realized that the Japanese were worse than the Americans at this point. And so they ended up joining the Americans, fighting back the Japanese. And did they fight them off?
So MacArthur kind of left the Philippines to fight by themselves. You know, the very famous speech, "I shall return," and like all these guerrilla fighters had to rise up to the occasion, and they were fighting for like 3 years without
Wow.
any weapons and really any supply and any backup from anyone. And yeah, and then MacArthur returned in like the late 1940s, and then there was the Manila massacre because uh MacArthur did not plan that the Japanese was going to fight until the last man.
Yeah.
And like it's so interesting because in movies, right, you think, the battlefield's like in the middle of nowhere and then you have like all these officers in their like really nice uniform. But like the Manila and the Nanking incident, right? The two Asian cities, and they were like fighting in like in the cities, like where someone's convenience store was, where the gas station was, and just
Yeah.
had a total destruction. And so I think a lot of times when people are like trying to sell a war, they're not trying to sell the humanity or like who is going to get affected by the war or like where the money is going.
Well, you
Um,
can't because if you did, then no one would participate in it. If you told them why are we going to war, and you're like, they got some valuable land that's worth a lot of money. You'd be like, well, I don't want to send my kids to die because you want more money. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in that. You
I
know?
don't know if you saw this like meme on the internet that's been like circulating lately. It's like America sends its geologists and it's all like the military.
No, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, but I believe it. I saw the meme of the Israeli Palestinian conflict with two missiles, and it's one of them is labeled our tax dollars, and the other one is also somehow also our tax dollars,
Yes.
and they're both crashing into one another. And you just take copy and paste that everywhere around the world, and that's what you get.
And
Um,
here, like our country, the roads are not so great, and our education's not doing so great, and like our homeless problem is off the hook.
in America,
Yeah, don't you think?
I think that we have 10 to 15 massive countrywide issues that need to be seriously looked at and at least partially responded to before we continue minding anyone else's business, is what I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that, and by the way, if we can rally and go ahead and, but you know what? I also think that sometimes you get, especially when you're successful and powerful, you get complacent and you need to get knocked on your butt back in order to be able to learn sometimes. And unfortunately, if you're not going to learn from people talking about it and complaining about it and yelling about it and screaming about it, then you have to learn from experience. I mean, it's the same
Mhm.
thing with growing up, like someone tells you, hey, there's a real, it's probably a good idea to do this and this and this in school or this and this and this internship. And you're like, no, I know better than you. And you're like, oh man, maybe I don't. But like
Yeah.
you learn one way or the other, and it's just better to learn the easy way. But if we have to learn the hard way, then it looks like that's what it might have to be, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'm gonna do for my kids. I don't know where else they're gonna go, but it's scary. It's crazy.
It is scary, it is crazy, and like politicians are okay with like starting wars. I'll be okay if the politicians themselves are going to be like going out there and fighting themselves. But
Yeah.
like, when it ends
Yeah.
up being like, maybe potentially your kids fighting a war, right? And then it's just like all the sacrifice for the military industrial complex. And yeah, it's just what it is. But
Yeah.
anyway,
But that's why we have these conversations. I think that's really valuable, and I think that not only is it valuable, I think that more and more people are waking up to it because I think that at a certain point, um, you could you could only gaslight so much, one
yeah.
way or the other, and we've been really living since World War II in times of gaslighting, just constant. Um, and I think that might be a consequence of the arrogance that is that's a product of success. Like you become
But what's
successful
success? If you think about it, America has not won a war in 80
since
years.
World War II.
And World War II, I have a theory that they won because China was holding the Japanese off for like 10 years before America was
Right.
getting into the war.
Okay, so you want to tell me about that? You want to dive into that history a little bit?
Yeah, so Japan was occupying like Manchuria and then they were continue to fight in China. And in a sense, and when US sent China to supplies to fight Japan, it's because US saw Japan's ambition and
Mhm.
knew that it was about to come to their territory. And
Yeah.
so then that's why they were like, okay, let's supply China.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is that if they weren't really, and by 1941, right? The Prince Konoe was trying to negotiate peace with the U.S. But I think U.S.
And
had
who's Prince Konaway? From which country?
from Japan,
Gotcha.
and he was actually not like prime minister just once, but like three times, because the military saw him as like a spare tire to like drive them off the cliff. And so then
Really?
every single time he would like resign, then they would like come and bring him up, and then like if he doesn't do what the military like fraction of the government wants him to do, then they threaten to kill him. So then he gets back
Hmm.
to the to the wheel, I mean to the truck. And
Wow.
then
He means
and then
hockey.
yeah, he just had to. And right after the war, he committed suicide. And so, but before
Wow.
that, he wrote a memoir about how he was trying to negotiate out of having to attack U.S.
Yeah.
And but he was ultimately unsuccessful because he was not as strong as the Warhawks like
Yeah.
Tojo. And I feel like when I was reading that, I was thinking like, wow, this could be what's happening in Washington right now, that like these neocons and whatever are like driving other people out of like negotiations.
So I mean, I mean, as far as there's been really, really good reporting about that happening with the Russia-Ukraine war. That every time it comes close to an end, that some people come in and sabotage the peace efforts that are interested in continuing the war. Um, but I think that a hopeful component potentially is that, and I think this was a little bit of the, you call them the, the neocons or the military industrial complex as a political personifications. Um, they, because they're so unlikable and because they're such liars and because they've done such unpopular things their entire lives, the youth is not interested in them and they were never interested in giving up power, so they don't really have too many successors themselves. And I think that they're like the neocon, and that's what we're seeing right now. I think in the American Republic, right wing, fractioning that's going on, is that right now there's a huge vacuum because a lot of the people that were really heavily in, that were huge influences in the last 20, 25 years are now getting older and becoming less relevant, and the youth does not, at all relate to anything that they're talking about. But they don't have any young successors because they were too arrogant for those 20, 25 years to keep people, to mold someone else. So I'm hoping, I mean, and again, I'm an optimist, and because of that I'm often wrong. you know, um, I'm often incorrect, but that's okay. Because
But what
I think
about
that,
the military I mean, profit? Think about like how
yeah.
every successful company is like Bel Air was about to go bankrupt until we fought another war.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah, yeah,
is,
yeah. And that's the problem with this kind of government supported capitalism. I mean, you don't even have to look at it from a military industrial camp. Like, look at it from a freaking airliner, perspective. Like, there's certain airlines that have been bailed out, time and time again, that have no business still being a business, And as far as the free market goes, it makes no sense that they're still around, or banks that governments bail out, or whatever it is. Like, true capitalism wouldn't allow those people to even survive, and then a better product would replace it, or a more thoughtful product, or whatever. But and I mean, this is coming to the point of just absolute, I'm just hypothesizing and just talking over here. But I mean, when robotics and AI get to the point, and I'm sure you're probably have more of your finger on the pulse of this in San Francisco than I do in Florida. But when robotics and AI come together, labor and resources are going to become significantly cheaper, to the extent that I don't know what money's going to mean in 50 years from now. Like, I don't know what, and Elon
yeah,
Musk talks about it a little bit, but like, I mean, think about it. If you get a Tesla robot that costs $20,000, that has, Grok incorporated into it, and is your housekeeper and cooks meals and goes to the supermarket, and your car is
maintain my dog
self-driving,
so he can stop barking while I'm doing podcasts.
and that's take care of your dog, seriously. By the way, but it'll probably leave you to take care of your dog because that's something you want to do for the most part, and you kind of pick and choose the things in life that you want to do. But I think that the only thing that's going to save America from total financial ruin is the potential explosion of 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 robotics and software. And if not,
Yeah.
then I think we're just in big trouble. I think that's really what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. But tell me about the quantum army, the quantum army, because
Yeah.
we keep
So
on
the quantum
digressing and it's fun. But I want to get into more into this.
Yeah, so the Quantum Army was the force um that planted a false flag on in Manchuria on September 18th and accused Chinese people of doing that. And so then they had the right to start a war.
Uh-huh. Like what we did with Vietnam.
Mhm. And it's actually interesting in Vietnam because Ho Chi Minh was actually, I saw some notes of Ho Chi Minh asking America for help during World War II, but
Mm.
America decided to help the French and to recolonize them. But anyway, I digress. And so Quantum Army was really the beginning of World War II for China, because they had taken over Manchuria.
China had taken back over.
No, I mean
Oh, sorry,
because
Japan had taken Manchuria for China, and now China's getting involved. So now, and okay, gotcha. And
the
what was this
Quantum
army?
Army was actually a Japanese force that taken over Manchuria, the Chinese territory.
Yes. Did I not
Yes.
say that? Or did I say that wrong?
I don't know. Anyway, it's
Okay,
late.
yes. Thank you for clarifying, because I'm sure I may have. Uh, so okay, got and what was and so the point of the army was a false flag army. Was to create false flag was to create the false flag as an excuse to start
The
an
invasion.
attack.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. And now what about what are some other war crimes that you've documented or or uncovered?
So many. Cannibalism is one. They got to the point that they were just like eating other people.
Ooh.
Yeah, actually, we're doing this podcast twice a month with James Bradley, and he wrote this book named Flyboys, and it's a story about how George Bush was flying into Chichijima and with like nine other airmen and then no, eight other airmen. Eight other airmen were captured and eaten by the Japanese, and George Bush
What?
somehow narrowly escaped with like a submarine that rescued him, and then he was out of there. But had he actually been eaten by the Japanese, history would have been so different.
Whoa. Was this cannibalism out of necessity? Were the Japanese
It was
starving
a
at this
part
point?
of also their culture of Bushido to eat a part of your enemy so then you can like gain their energy.
Okay.
And so then they barbecue their liver. And and this story was so interesting because in like the 19 well in 1990s, I think the late Iris Chan wrote The Rape of Nanking, and then someone called her about, oh, I was in this secret war crime trial, and and Iris was like, this sounds way too crazy. Oh, James, why don't you go call him? And so James and then went and visited this guy, and then he even brought George Bush to Chichijima to see if this was a real thing that had happened.
Whoa.
And then it's been confirmed, and then he wrote the book, and then HBO bought it as a part of the series on the Pacific. And so it is a very fascinating and yet true story that they were doing this kind of cannibalism. And then there were also the issues of forced labor because when Japan had taken over the Philippines, then they were having these people do Baton Death March, and
It's crazy
and
that that happens everywhere.
yeah,
You know, it just feels like it was normal, like practice. Like that's what
it's
people
just
do.
normal, standard, everyday thing when you're fighting a
You
war.
never know when somebody's gonna walk into town and make you do forced labor and death marches. I mean, you never
Yes,
know. It
exactly.
just might happen. It's
Yeah.
okay.
And it's interesting because Japan never ratified the Geneva Convention. So when they were shipping these POWs, they never really marked the ship. And
Wow.
so then the Allied forces didn't know what was happening with these ships, and a lot of them were struck by friendly fire. So, for example, like the Lisbon Maru that I recently watched a movie on, it was struck by by friendly fire, and well, the fire is not too friendly if it's going to kill you.
Yeah,
And,
not too friendly.
and the Japanese were then, barring people from escaping the deck, and like, and so then people just all died in, well, and then also when people were trying to escape, they had like six suicide officers that stayed in the ship and like tried to gun down everyone while going down with the ship. These were
Wow.
like fanatic times, that these people were fighting this war.
And what was the it's so interesting. What was the rationale for this war? Like World War, like Europe, I guess, had a rationale for a war. What was the rationale leading up to all this was just Asian politics and Asian, just war history of war that
To
happened
get
to coincide at
resources.
the same time. So it's about resource, but it coincided just happens to be the same time as World War II.
I think it has to do with economic issue, because also at the time, like when after Quantum Army had taken over Manchuria,
Mhm.
they were having propaganda that said that, okay, there are 100 million Japanese. It's actually not true. I think it's more like 80 million Japanese, and we are running out of space in our Japanese mainland, so we need to expand. And so then they were having these policies, for these Japanese settlers to go to China and take over these Chinese people's farmers' land and kick them out of their Chinese, and kick them out of their own farmland. So I think that's interesting, that, and I think it was mostly economics, because by the time that they had attacked, Pearl Harbor, it was because, Roosevelt was going to embargo on oil, and so then they needed Southeast Asia for oil and rubber,
Hmm.
and so a lot of it had to do with economics.
Right. But the economic issues happened to occur at the same time as World War II was just happening in the rest of the world.
I think it was boiling up, because remember what I was saying, like from
Yeah, about
1905.
the early
Yeah,
19.
and then they see that, it was, and that the rest of Europe was busy fighting a war, and Europeans had power, I mean, had colonies also in Southeast Asia. So I think
Mhm.
part of it is also opportunist.
Right, right, right. And what was everyone? That's a great point. Like you just see that everything's on fire, and while everyone's distracted, you just take advantage.
Right, while your town is on fire, you might as well go and steal your neighbor's TV. uh,
A little too, too true for San Francisco. I feel like.
I know.
I feel
You've
like. How
probably
long have you
seen it
lived?
on social media that, like, while there's like a riot, then there's like they're like running into the liquor store to steal things out of a liquor store in Oakland. It's like crazy.
Yeah, yeah. How long are you living in San Francisco for?
Since I was 10 actually, but I went
Wow,
away
your
for
whole life.
school. Yeah, almost. Yeah. Two
And what do you
third of my
think?
life. I think it needs change. It needs some change. Yeah, how
Yeah,
long have you been in Florida for?
I've been in Florida for 4 years. I'm from New York originally, so I spent the first 20 years of my life in New York, 18 years of my life in New York. I spent a year and a half in Israel studying there. Jewish, and I spent some time there, and then I spent some time in Seattle, like I mentioned, and then I came, and then I ended up there was no Jewish girls there, or very few Jewish girls there for me, so I moved back to New York for a little bit till I met my wife, and we moved down to Florida from here. But I mean, we'll see what happens. As far as
Yeah,
we're not married to Florida, we're married to one another. So so I mean, we
yeah.
can go anywhere, but we like it here.
I've been
It's
seeing
not.
these memes of like Florida people saying like, "Oh, we're too full for New Yorkers."
Yes, 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 yes. And you know what? Unfortunately, I kind of get caught up in that because I am one of the New Yorkers coming down, but I happen to be one of the nice New Yorkers, so they don't have a problem with me as far as I know. But you never know. What was you never know. Um, but you know what? 'Cause it's so funny, but people, there's something so powerful about the magic of San Francisco that like people really are not willing to give up on it, like no matter what, like no matter, it feels like, like it's turned into the last couple of years, and people still love it there. And people still like they're not going, as far as I know, are they?
Uh, that's a very controversial topic. I feel like
Oh, is it?
we're here, we are talking about war crime, but I'm like, oh my gosh, people are not giving up on. My in-laws would never give up on San Francisco. I feel like they're like, oh, it's just like that in the 70s, and then it would turn around and blah
Yeah.
blah blah. So, yeah,
I had what do you call it? I'd only recently discovered. I did an episode. I was also thinking because I'm a big Grateful Dead hippie fan,
yeah,
and I read a book that had tied, and I didn't even realize that this was, and this actually what got me interested in geography to begin with. It tied in Asian culture to San Francisco, and that it was and the first there was the school of Chinese culture, I think, maybe I forgot the art school of Chinese culture.
yeah. It's I think it's Lanwa, but it's also very interesting because the 1882 had a lot of to do with San Francisco as well because Chinese people were mining gold at a faster rate than the white people.
Better workers, as far as we know.
And Lincoln was like desperate to build this railroad too to
Hmm.
go to the west to the Pacific so then he can go trade with China.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's and Marco Polo in like the 1200 was talking about how Chinese people have paper currency now and we need to get there and blah blah blah. So
Wow,
like
so it's been on
now,
there for a while.
yeah, and but China unfortunately just faced the century of humiliation with drug addiction.
Yeah,
And but now we're seeing really a resurgence of China
yeah.
in the 21st century. And
Yeah.
they're really a people of to like mind their own business, I think. And just they were just doing their country first before getting intervene I mean before intervening with like
Hmm.
all over the world and spreading democracy and whatnot.
Yeah,
So
and like we mentioned, I think while we were talking about on our introductory call, the Chinese are doing a enormous amount of the business and investment around the world that America was doing for a long time. And again, part of the way that America spread their empire was financial. And I'm actually hopefully doing an episode soon about China's relationship with Africa nowadays, and their investment there, and what they stand to gain out of it, and whether America's involved at all, or if we're trying to be even. I don't know anything
I
about
don't
it.
know if you watched this like one video of like Kamala was trying to go into this African stadium and then
Yes.
she started China bashing and then they were and then the host was like this stadium is built by Chinese money and blah 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 and asked her to leave if she doesn't want to stay.
Wow. I did not see that.
But yeah, I think
Wow.
Western media really does bar people from like getting the real information out there in this world.
Yeah, yeah,
Eurocentric.
we're not even Eurocentric. We're American centric. I mean, I cannot tell you how little most people, and I teach high school, and I'm the oldest of six, and I'm 30, right? So I mean, I've got quite, I've got a little bit of my finger on the pulse of the younger generation. They don't know anything about Europe. They barely know anything about America. They really do. I think that one thing that China has done more successfully than America, at least in the last several dozen decades, is that Americans don't value education or teachers at all. And I've heard
Yeah.
that China does more, or a lot more. And we don't, I mean, we look at it, if you tell someone I'm a high school teacher, they're like, that sucks. Like that's usually what the response is. They don't say, wow, you're forging the next generation and the youth of tomorrow that are going to be in the workforce, and the scientists and the engineers and the next scientists, and the next teachers and politicians. Like, you're the person shaping them, and we
Yeah.
just seem to care about that. I mean, it's wild to me, and
It is wild.
there's a Jewish author from 19th century Germany that said that to him all the world's problems comes down to issue with education.
Yes.
Like, education can fix everything if you just give people the right context, and everyone can learn to speak one another's language, then a lot of our issues would just fall apart right away. You know?
Exactly. And I really appreciate your podcast because I think it really educates the general public and to share, things as we're learning together. And I think discovered your episode when you were interviewing the UN. One of
John
the,
Perkins, yes,
yes,
yeah, 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 yeah. That's right, the
yeah,
economic hitman.
yeah, that was interesting because that's also very similar to like Prince Konoe for like
Hmm.
negotiation with like
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor and whatnot.
He did a few episodes, a few other big podcasts that were much longer than mine. I hope to do another one with him, but he did a couple of like 3 hour ones with Danny
Well,
Jones and Patrick Bet David, and
so
they
he's
go
like a
into
Joe
that.
Rogan.
Who? The which one?
John Perkins is like a Joe Rogan.
Oh, by the way, if he was, I'd have a lot more viewers than I have right now. But but if he also was, he wouldn't have gone back to me. So but can I actually ask real quickly because I don't really know anything about this. What was China's? You mentioned this earlier in passing, but China's relationship, or I guess the East's relationship with Russia during all this, or the USSR. Did they have any relationship? Were they, were they conflicting with one another? What were things like there?
Well, Russia had gone into like if you go to Harbin, there's like a big Jewish and Russia or I mean Russia influence because
Mhm.
right after the revolution, a lot of the people who were escaping the revolution ended up in Harbin.
Where's that?
That was in Manchuria. So
Gotcha.
like that area. And so I feel like Chinese people mostly mind their own business.
They do, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's mostly economic interest. For example, Russia had built that railroad just for trade purpose and whatnot. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm finding. I mean, I'm finding that most people just want to mind their own business and, just want to like be with their families and try to just be happy, be comfortable, have what they need and have what they have, and to just live a good, meaningful life. I think that's what
Exactly.
really like. I think that listen, you go to Wisconsin, you go to Iowa, and you go to, I mean, even if you go upstate New York, I mean, if you go a couple, you go 20, 30, 40 miles north of you, I'm sure that most of the people there are just regular people that just want to live their lives, and
Yep.
like. Maybe they have political opinions. Maybe they don't care about politics. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're interested in war or not. But like, at the end of the day, like what's right in front of you is right in front of you, and the most pressing part of
Well,
your
if
life.
they have money in their Vanguard account, they're interested in more because that's gonna mean that their stock's gonna go up.
Yeah, yeah. That's the other thing that China does better. Who was I talking to about this? I think that we put so much pressure on ourselves to act so short term. Our quarterly earnings and what's our stock share at right now, and and it dipped.
What's the next election going to look like?
4 years.
Right?
Yeah. And by the way, you get in, and then it takes a year for the president to figure out what's going on, and then he tries to do something, and then at that point it's the midterms, and after that he has to either go up for re-election or he's already out the door, and like nothing can get done. I mean, it's really, and
Yeah.
on one hand, it's a beautiful thing because it really does prevent from both the right and the left a lot of more damage that I think could have been done by, because what I think that
But a
people
lot
don't
of
know.
presidents are working for the people who are not even elected
That's
in. Like
right.
they're
That's
not,
right.
for example, in the World War II context, the China lobby, right? They were making money out of USDA contracts and they were
Hmm.
lobbying FDR, and most people didn't even know that they existed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. That's crazy. I wonder how much of that still goes on that we just, that just swept under the rug or kept hush hush.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere you freaking, anything that has a regulation, anything that has any kind of formal representation has corruption, period.
Yeah.
And so like at a certain point, the question isn't like, oh, I'm looking for something that isn't corrupt. The question just is, who are the honest people that I could deal with? And
Right.
that's really the question.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to get rid of corruption.
Yeah.
And I mean, as much as you would like to, you can spend your life fighting corruption, which you'll just do to the day you die. And then the day you die, someone else will have to pick up and do it also because it's never going to end. But yeah, it's fascinating.
On that note, I'm going to cook dinner.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much for doing this. This is such a pleasure. Um,
Yeah.
this was a lot of information, a lot of really great information. And you want to tell people again just where to find your organization and how
Yes.
they could follow you?
Yeah, pacificatrocities.org. And if you are on YouTube, please hit subscribe for Pacific Front Untold.
Pacific Front and Toad,
Pas-
Toad?
no, Untold.
Untold. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Gotcha. Beautiful. Jenny, this is so much fun. Thanks so much. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
night. Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye.